Welcome to Passive Aggressive Income. This program may contain strong language. The content may not be suitable for audiences under the age of 17. We understand many of our listeners may not agree with all of our personal viewpoints. We in no way, shape, or form mean to be offensive to anyone. Our show notes will provide all of our source material included for each episode. Now let's get passive aggressive. Welcome back to another episode of Passive Aggressive Income. I am Mims and I'm here with Lexie, and she's going to be talking about a very um exciting topic. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, we can just jump right in. So it was just announced that now owner-occupied conventional loans will be changing to 95% LTV. So what that means is in an effort to provide more affordable housing, if you buy a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, and you plan to move into that property, you only have to pay 5% down, which is awesome because
It's amazing.
my first property, I only had to pay 5% down. And then right after that, the policy changed. And so currently, so this takes place November 18th, 2023, that will be changed for only 5% down is required. But currently, as it stands, you have to pay 15% down, which is quite significant. So, in a previous episode, we had just talked about all the many different excuses people give on why they can't invest in real estate right now. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, to some degree, those excuses are valid, especially if you're like, I can't afford to buy a house right now,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're looking at super expensive houses with super high interest rates. Putting 15% down can feel super unattainable, but hopefully, this news where you only have to pay a third of that for a down payment will make this goal seem a little bit more in reach.
And is that nationwide or just for, okay, so
It
it's for
is
everybody.
nationwide.
Okay.
Yep.
That
Yes.
is
So
amazing.
if you want to do any research, the policy is called Desktop Underwriter version 11.1. So that's a Fannie Mae policy. So that's a government loan where you will only have to pay 5% down for owner occupied multifamily units up to 4 units.
And
So,
we can put that in their show notes so that if you
yes.
are interested in reading more and educating yourself on that, we'll put that right in the show notes so you don't have to go digging for it.
Yep, for sure. So, what does owner occupied mean? I know when I hear like LTV and desktop underwriter version 11.1 and like all of these things, like what are they talking about? So, let's break it down.
Right.
So, to get the 5% down conventional loan, you must owner occupy the property. This means you have to move into that property within 60 days of your closing date, and you must
Mm-hmm.
stay for 1 full year.
Mm-hmm.
After 1 year, you can purchase another property and it can you can purchase it owner occupied and you can move into it and stay there for a year. But to get that 5%, you are required to move in and stay for 1 full year.
Right.
So, how does this help small investors like Mims and I? And maybe you too, if you're listening. Property prices have continued to rise, so the down payment required has rose along with it. And while this may not be as big of a deal for larger real estate corporations that can afford really big down payments, for like
Mm-hmm.
mom and pop investors, 15% down can just feel super unrealistic. So
Mm-hmm.
especially if you are looking at a more expensive property that's like in a nicer area, or if you are looking at a fourplex, those tend to be a lot of money because there's 4 units in them.
Right.
And I know when Alex and I have looked at triplexes and fourplexes, and we have to pay 15% down up front, like that's not happening for us. So if you find a property that's, for example, $300,000 with now the law change only requiring 5% down, you only have to put 15,000 dollars down in comparison to currently where it stands at 15% down. That's $45,000 you would owe upfront. And not many investors, or probably the general public at all, has that kind of money laying around to just put towards a down payment. And So this allows just average people to get started investing at a reasonable buy-in cost and allows them to fund renovations and save for other life things that come up. And it can really help you set up for buying another property a lot sooner.
All that information is so important to know. And I think that it's going to really help turn the tables on how much people are able to buy and what they're able to buy and that they even can buy. So I'm so excited for this.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little bit of a history on my situation because I've bought properties both with the 95% LTV and the 85% LTV and just how the difference in that has affected like our strategy and where we're at today.
Hmm.
So I got really lucky and I bought my first duplex in November 2020. I got a conventional loan, 30-year fixed interest rate at 2.99%, which
Mm.
was amazing and seems like a dream right now.
Yep.
And I only have to put 5% down because that was the law then. And then 1 year later, in December 2021, the law had changed, now requiring 15% down on all multifamily properties. So we were required to put 15% down. And with that, we were really searching. We were getting crafty with this. We contacted a whole bunch of different loan officers and banks and all sorts of things to try and get just better loan terms and having to put that 15% down. And we ended up finding a local credit union, which allowed us to do a 15-year ARM, which an
Hmm.
ARM is an adjustable interest rate. So after 15 years, our interest rate will adjust with whatever is happening in the market.
Right.
But because we, made the sacrifice that after 15 years, the interest rate would adjust, which we locked it in for 3% for 15 years, we only had to put 10% down instead of 15, which was really key for us.
Hmm.
So, like I said, we searched high and low, contacting all sorts of banks, and ended up finding this one with good loan conditions. So the difference with that is the loan through a government is through like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. They take on the loan; they're the ones lending you the money, and all the underwriting is going through the government. However,
Hmm.
the loan that we locked down, the underwriting is going through our bank. So they're the ones lending us the money. And that's why they have more favorable terms because that's like their decision. That's not a government thing.
And I think that it's like I mentioned before in the last episode that before you go and apply for a bunch of different loans, make sure that you are ready to take on the type of loan that you're applying for, because a lot of them, you'll call one and they're going to be really set on giving you one that isn't doesn't work well for you, I would like to say it. Maybe they'll do it at like 15% when they can give you 5%, like, and they'll do a 10-year instead of the 30-year, like it's just if you shop around and you look at different terms, then you're going to see that they're not all the same. And there's going to be different lenders that are flexible and some that are not. So I think it's really important for, like Lexie just mentioned, and we do that too. And don't just go to the bank that you have your savings and your checking account at, because it may not be the right one for you. It's like shopping for a car, like it's not all going to be the same. Each different car is going to get you to the same place, but it's not going to be as smooth as a ride for you. So make sure that you really look into what you're signing up for, because it's long term. It's something that you're going to have to pay. And, there's more favorable loans out there for you.
Yeah, exactly. Just make sure that when every step of the process, you're not just going with the first option that you see. You really
Mm-hmm.
want to do your research, whether it's finding a good loan officer or if it's finding a good person who's going to do your inspection. Don't
Mm.
just go with the first person or like the first recommendation. Take like a personal responsibility to do the research and make sure that you're finding someone who has, the best situation to offer you.
Right. And I think that being in this, for you and for my husband and I, we've found a loan officer that really works with us and knows us like by first and both by our first names. And, we can call him up if we have questions. And, like you just said, the home inspectors or whatever, like if you're in this for this long, you're going to make connections and you're going to find people that are easier to work with. And I think that's super important that you look for those types of people and build those connections. So, yeah, great point.
Yeah, absolutely. So to jump back in, when I got this 15-year ARM loan, 10% down, 3% interest rate, that really worked for my situation. And maybe, getting a 30-year fixed mortgage would be better for you if you're buying a house that doesn't really need any work. But the duplex that I bought needed a lot of work. So we're like 15 years, we're definitely going to refinance way before then, anyways. So the
Hmm.
fact that it, starts adjusting after that 15-year point was not really that big of a deal for us. And we were planning on doing some renovations and then refinancing in the next year, getting money out to fund another property. Then interest rates, doubled. So that didn't quite work out. But that's okay because we still have, as it stands, 13 years before our 3% interest rate starts moving. So
Right.
that's plenty of time for us to refinance. And it's not really that much of a concern. But yeah, just to reiterate the point, make sure that whatever your specific situation is, that the loan that you're looking at works for you. But the good news is you won't have to do so much shopping around now to get low down payments because it's 5% for everybody, as long as you're,
Yes.
doing a conventional loan and planning on owner occupying.
Right.
So a little bit more on how getting 5% down on our first property really set us up for success. Because my husband and I were able to put so little down on our first property, we still had expendable cash that we had saved to purchase another property after the required 1 year stay. And in addition to that, we bought a house that was like completely newly renovated. So
Hmm.
we could start renting out the other unit without doing any maintenance or any renovations. We ended up furnishing it. And I think literally within 1 month of us moving into the place, we already had people staying and paying to stay there, which was awesome.
Yes.
And this allowed us to buy a real fixer upper. So, yeah, unfortunately, we did have to put 10% down rather than 5% on the second ones. And we really could have used that extra money for renovations because we had so much to do right off the bat. And we are still in the process of paying for some pretty pricey renovations right now. Like we have to side our house. We're about to
Hmm.
start doing new flooring throughout the entire unit that I'm in the next week or two. And knowing that we only will have to put 5% down on our next property because we do plan on continuing to house hack makes that goal not seem so far away.
I love to tell people that you're not like a true landlord until you've replaced a furnace, a water heater, or replaced your roof. Like those three will make you. It's just super expensive and like a roof is a whole project that obviously not everybody is going to get on the roof and like redo that, but like the whole process of having tenants in there and then having to contract that out and then it's the bill on that type of maintenance is just astronomical. So if
It
you've gone
is.
through that and especially all in 1 year as my husband and I did, that will fucking make you.
Yeah, it teaches some hard lessons to make sure you're looking at those really expensive items before putting an offer and before purchasing the
Hmm.
house. Because if you're like, oh, the water heater is super old, the
Yes.
boiler is super old, it needs a new
Yep.
roof, like all of those things are so expensive. And
Hmm.
if you have all of those like big ticket items right up front, then like maybe you can negotiate for
Hmm.
them to, help out with the fixes or have those things replaced before you actually go through with the purchasing. But yeah, you don't want to end up finding out that you buy your new house and all of a sudden you have like tens of thousands of dollars of maintenance items that need to be taken care of immediately.
Yeah, and that'll make you regret becoming an investor, a hands-on investor, because especially if you're not like taking into account like all these things. And we are going to do an episode of what to look for when you are touring a property that you are interested in buying, just so that can check that off of your list, like good walls or whatever. We're going to dive into that in a different episode. So make sure that you jump into that one. But it's really important that you are aware of things that you're potentially gonna have to replace or fix when you are looking at properties.
Yeah, and we'll discuss more in a future episode, but I do want to kind of give a funny story along
Yeah.
those lines. So, like I said, when I bought this duplex, it was a real pile. Like it was very old. It had just been used and abused and passed on to
Hmm.
landlord who hadn't done anything to it. And it's also a 100-year-old house. So keeping that in mind, when Alex and I were doing our final walkthrough, we were just making sure like everything's in working order. Like I said, it was December of 2021, so it's very cold, and we have
Right.
radiators. And there was no tenants in the main floor, so the heat was set to very low. And
Hmm.
we were having like some crazy, like super crazy cold weather and snowstorms. And I didn't even think of this, but Alex went to go turn on the heat, and it was one of those like really old thermostats with
Uh-huh.
like the mercury in it and everything, like
Uh-huh.
really old. And so he turned it on when we first started the walkthrough, and then we, continued on. And we had never had radiators before, so we didn't really know what to expect. And
Right.
by the end of the walkthrough, we're like, it's still really cold in here. And we went around touching all of the radiators, and they were ice cold. And we're like, okay, so that means our water heater is out, or the
Mm.
boiler is out.
Yeah.
And this is a really old boiler too. And we had
Yeah.
brought it to the attention of the seller. We're like,
Hmm.
hey, that thing's really old. Like it should probably replace. And he's like, no, 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 it's fine. Like like we've had no issues with it. And this was on our final walkthrough, which was in the evening, and we had closing the next morning at like 7 a.m.
Oh,
And so we obviously had to delay closing, and we ended
uh,
up calling a maintenance guy to come check it out. And he was out there the next morning, and he's like, yeah, this thing is not like this thing
on
is
its last
not
leg.
safe. Like it's leaking carbon monoxide. Like it's time to be replaced. And at the same time, the current property owner had his guy go out
Mm.
and check things out.
Right.
And he's like, oh, yeah, he fixed it. Like, no, he did not fix
No.
it. Like, this is what our guy said. So he had someone else come out, and then we ended up agreeing to each pay half. So so the current property owner paid for half right up front, had it replaced, and then we were able to actually finance our half onto the loan because it appraised for a little bit higher than the purchase price. So we were able to just finance that with our 3% loan over the next, it's a 30-year loan, but yeah, the 15-year arm. So it was like a cost that we didn't even really have to think about right up front. And
Right.
we were able to catch that right away before purchasing the property, because that would have been a nightmare if we showed up and we had no heat. And like, this is our first experience with this new house.
Right. Yeah, and I think that story is so relevant to tell, because not a lot of people know that you can do what you did and adding it onto the loan so that you aren't just, shelling it out like here's a bunch of cash on top of my down payment on top of closing costs, and so that all can pile up, but you were able to finance that in a very smart way. So I think that a lot of people don't know that you can do that. So what a great story and what a great experience that you have, because well, not in a sense of having to delay and all that, but it's such a way to learn this whole process. So I think it's almost beneficial for people to go through things like this.
Yeah, it definitely is. And yeah, like you said, especially when now we are paying 10% down and we have to do a bunch of renovations before we can even move in, having that, I think it was like $3,000 that we can just finance onto the
Yeah.
loan that we don't have to pay up front made a huge difference. And
Mm-hmm.
having to go through that experience, every time we have to go through a mishap when it comes to real estate, we learn a little bit.
Yes.
And we, build our list of contacts of people who can do HVAC. A side story from this,
Yeah.
the first guy that we sent out to go check out the radiator or the boiler,
Mm-hmm.
who said it was leaking carbon monoxide, and so therefore it needed to be, taken care of ASAP because there were tenants in the upper unit. The next day he was going to go back out and like check things out and measure to get a new one. And we never heard from him again. And so Alex and I, being just like anxious people that we are, because we had worked with
Yeah.
him several times before this and he was great,
Yeah.
like he probably died in our basement because of the carbon monoxide.
Oh
And
my
we were
gosh.
so nervous and we knew what his van looked like. So we like drove by the house and looked around and it wasn't there. And then the next guy that we sent out, didn't report any dead bodies in the basement. So this guy ended up just blowing us off. And like, we were prepared to pay him. Like this would have been a great job. But
Yeah.
instead, he didn't follow through and we never heard from him again. So yeah, you learn not only what to look for in final walkthroughs, you learn about how to delay your closing day and how to finance things. You also learn what contractors are
Mm.
good and what ones to avoid.
Oh yeah. Like dealing with contractors is a whole other episode. Like I have had so many different horror stories and especially if you are going to go into like a move-in situation and you have
Mhm.
a contractor in there that is doing a flip or doing all these like different maintenance things and then they don't end up doing it and you're not and you have somebody moving in there and then everything is not up to the standards that you want to rent it out. It's a shit show, but that is for another episode.
Yeah. I think we could probably do a whole episode of like mishaps dealing with shitty contractors. It'd
Yeah.
be pretty fun as
Yeah,
and
I would need
therapeutic. Yeah.
I was gonna say I would need like a screaming pillow right next to me every time just because I still get mad to this day, but I'm
Me
like, let
too.
it go.
Yeah, I know. It's funny how like that can get you so worked up even like a year plus later.
Yes, oh my God.
But yeah, so anyways, to get back on track here, another option for people who already, have a property that they're happy living in, maybe they've done some renovations, um, but want to take extra cash out. So maybe interest rates aren't super favorable right now, but it could make sense for some people to refinance their loan
Mm,
even into a higher interest rate because if they put down 10% or 15%, or maybe they've been paying off the loan for several years and have a bunch of money into the property, they can refinance, get all of the extra cash out minus that 5% that has to stay in the loan. And
hmm.
that can really set them up for funding, a lot more renovations or maybe saving for a new property or other life things like medical bills or travel or just generally, better quality of life.
You're right.
And in addition to that, because markets are pretty crazy, chances are their house is probably appreciated too. So again, that's
Hmm.
even more money that they can take out because it only requires 5% down that needs to stay in the loan, which I think is
Right.
huge.
I love a good refi. Like, oh, I live for that.
Yeah, one day. It doesn't quite make sense for me right now with where I'm at to refinance into a higher interest rate, but this is definitely something that I'm going to look into because we have done so much to this property. And I think once we do siding, even if we end up paying a little bit higher of an interest rate,
Hmm.
having all of that extra money that we can take out will set us up on a path to success to buying another property a lot faster.
Right.
So, just to sort of wrap up this episode, I want to say that I really do hope this news makes you feel more confident that you can invest in real estate too, despite many of the excuses that we've heard and that you've maybe told yourself. It is possible, and with only having to pay 5% down, it could be a lot more attainable now versus having to pay 15%. And
Right.
even if you purchase a property now with high interest rates, you can refinance again in the future and only have to keep 5% of the money into your home loan. So just because you buy a property now at, 7.5 or more interest rates, maybe those will go down and you can, refinance, take more money out. That's always an option.
Right. And that's the fun part about the real estate market is that everything is always fluctuating. So it's bad right now, but this can totally change everything for investors. So it's just a wave and you got to learn how to ride it and you got to learn how to be patient. And once you figure out, the patience of it and how to track the market and how to buy in a smart way, then you're golden.
Yeah, for sure. So make sure to check out last week's episodes on if you are still one of those people who feels like you have a ton of excuses on why you can't invest in real estate right now. We're going to tell you that you're wrong. So
Yes.
go listen to that.
You're
And
totally wrong, but we love you.
yeah, so we do. We appreciate you being here, but we are going to call you out.
Yes. Yeah. It might be like a personal dig here and there, like, ooh, like they're coming for me. But we are doing this out of love and out of wanting to see you like get out there and do you. So it's not a negative thing.
Right. This is like with each episode, if things do feel kind of personal, like we really aren't trying to call anyone out or shame them for their lifestyles or anything. We're just telling you from our experience what has worked for us,
Right.
and give advice based on our own personal situation. So we do hope that you find it helpful.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. And next week we are moving away from real estate again. But as usual, you know us, we're going to circle back. So hope
Oh
you
yeah.
enjoyed. It felt like going back to our roots a little bit since we had so
For
many real
sure.
estate episodes right in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, we dabble in so much that it's kind of hard for us to just stick to one thing to talk about. So we are going to be covering just a lot of different things and other ways to make passive income. So, and that's the whole, nature of our podcast. So, we're going to be jumping back into real estate. We're going to be jumping out. It's just the way that we operate.
Yeah. All right. So excited for the next one. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next Monday.
Bye.
Bye. Passive Aggressive Income was written, recorded, edited, and produced by co-hosts and creators Mims and Lexie. We truly want to thank our listeners, collaborators, friends, and family that continuously support us for all the love we receive. If you enjoy our show, please give us a glowing rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram to see what we are up to. For any inquiries, please email passiveaggressiveincome2023@gmail.com. Episodes of Passive Aggressive Income are available wherever you listen to podcasts, so make sure to subscribe and like us on your favorite streaming platform.